Okay. Good morning, good morning, good morning. You all came here for a reason. We're going to keep it going. We're so very, very appreciative of what an amazing event we had last night. For those of you that were there, thank you so much for your participation, your generosity. Speaking of generosity, I wanted to acknowledge, our sponsors you see on the back of the agenda, the long list of the organizations that have sponsored to make this thing happen in Haines and happen. It's just very, very appreciated. The breakfast this morning, as you can see on the screen, was sponsored to us by Constantine Mining, and we're going to hear from Garfield. But would you please give them and all of our sponsors a round of applause and appreciation? Yeah. And so we've got one last panel of our agenda. We've been joined today by members of the community in the AMA Haines branch. And so we're really glad to have you all here with us and give you a chance to see our support for the sector that you're working for and with. And the session here is titled "The Wealth That Surrounds Us." And I think that's very fitting for the fact that, sometimes it's overlooked what really is there. And so we've got a few folks that have been scratching above and below the surface, and we're going to get some updates. And I'm going to go ahead and invite the panel that's here physically. So we've got Garfield, MacVeigh, we've got Mike and Helge. We're over here. So if you all would just go ahead and join us here. We've got two virtual presenters today. And for those of you in Haines, as you know, the days and times that we're in does not always allow folks to travel freely yet. And we're very pleased to be able to have a blended event this session. So yeah, anywhere except for here. But and so we've been able to have almost all of our presenters here, but were a few that really added a lot of value to our the content of our agenda. And so we were very happy to have them beam in, and you can see on the screen there, we've got Deantha and Tessa pegged. We're going to actually start off the agenda with the executive director for AMA, Deantha, who's been traveling across the globe and doing the good work of AMA and one of our partners. She wasn't here last night to win those tickets. So sorry, Deantha, you're going to have to rain check on that. We had a great event as always, and I'm not even sure where those ended up with, but we missed you in person, but so glad you could join us today. We've got a good spattering of folks throughout from our own regional attendees and joined today by the Haines branch. So unfortunately, you're only seeing the panel, but welcome, good morning, and the floor is yours to give us an update on all things mining.
Thanks so much, Robert. I'm disappointed I'm not there for a number of reasons, including winning tickets, because I'm very ready to fly again. As Robert mentioned, I'm just returning from a pretty large convention that happens every 4 years, didn't happen last year. And keeping that in mind that I was in a very large community, I thought it best to not travel to the small town of Haines. So I appreciate so much you guys letting me patch in here remotely, and I miss seeing your faces. I told you in February when we were on a screen like this, I miss seeing your faces, and that remains true. And I very much hope to see you all soon. So today, and I'll be quick because you guys have some amazing presenters from the companies that I represent, as well as Tessa from AFA, who I dearly enjoy working with, following up. So I consider myself sort of kicking off the good speakers of those that operate in Southeast Alaska. Robert just asked me to give you a quick overview of the potential in Southeast and some of the benefits and challenges that we're seeing, and flag some regulatory issues that we all should be focused on as we look to bring growth to Southeast Alaska. So when I spoke to you in February, we were all working at the theme of getting through to 2022. And I don't think much has changed in terms of all of us getting through to 2022. I think we thought here in September we would be in a bit of a different place, but I still think that in February, we spent some time reflecting on what we've learned over the past 18 months or so, and how to really make anything work. And that's certainly true in the mining industry. So looking at the bright side, we have found a way to not only sustain ourselves and the operations and the lifestyles as we knew it and as we know it now, but we've started to adapt and figure out how to grow. And that's certainly the case in Southeast Alaska. Southeast Alaska remains a geologist's dream. If you spend any time with folks much smarter than I that have lengthy geologic backgrounds, Southeast Alaska has been explored for a long time and is well understood to be one of the most highly mineralized regions in the state. So you have benefited and been bequeathed a large geologic region where you've got well over a dozen deposits from Yakutat to Prince of Wales Island that are identified as being realistic to become mines someday. Not just a little bit here and there, but deposits large enough and promising enough that they could be turned into operations in the very near future. You can look at operations like, your two hometown mines, Kensington and Greens Creek. You've got your largest for-profit employers in all of Southeast Alaska at those two mines. You've got a combined nearly 900 jobs there and millions of dollars in tax revenue for their community. So across Southeast Alaska, you've got other projects that have the potential to do that same thing for various Southeast Alaska communities. So a quick note on a statewide level, I think some of you have heard me share these facts and data before, but mining statewide employs about 10,000 miners from across the state. Our industry average wage is $115,000 a year. Obviously, good year-round, high wage jobs that you can support a family on. We employ workers in over 90 Alaska communities across the state, a lot of these in small rural areas, and 14 Southeast communities. What this means is we have 14 communities in Southeast Alaska that have mining industry employees working in them. And that's not specifically Juneau or Haines where the flagship operations are. And I know that there are many Haines community members that commute to the large mines in Juneau, but there are a number of Southeast Alaska mining employees that either work in exploration or they commute to mines elsewhere in the state of Alaska. So 14 of those communities in Southeast Alaska, it's a number we're really proud of to have that employment spread across your region. So mining spends nearly $900 million in goods and services from Alaska-based companies. It's a number we're really proud of as well. We could not do what we do without the small businesses around Alaska that support our industry. Mining gives $175 million annually to Alaska Native corporations and $166 million in taxes to local and state governments. So very proud of our economic impact. I'm disappointed I wasn't able to be there at all, but to see Meilani's Southeast by Numbers presentation. She always does a wonderful job at that. And I'm sure she told you that mining has been a bright spot in your economy and is something that we've been able to see actually grow in these trying times. We've been blessed with conditions that have allowed us to sustain operations through the pandemic. In fact, grew employment a little bit in terms of being able to keep our industry going and growing, like I mentioned earlier. So we do have issues. We all have issues. And when I spoke with you all in February, I mentioned that we had just seen the inauguration of President Biden, and we were watching confirmation hearings of various cabinet officials that talked about the Biden administration's goals for growing renewable energy, for reaching administration goals that aligned with the Green New Deal and things like that. And we were appreciative to see our congressional delegation and others highlight that with these renewable energy goals, there needs to be a substantial, massive growth in mineral production to supply the various minerals needed for these administration goals. And we heard some now elected cabinet officials say that they understood that they do see a demand for various minerals, and we understand that we should be focusing on getting those from domestic sources and not overseas and in regions where maybe we aren't so politically aligned. Unfortunately, that really hasn't come to fruition. We were excited to be able to partner with folks and talk about the various minerals that the United States has to contribute to these goals. And since that time, we've seen just a massive rollback of a lot of the measures that were put in place by the previous administration that would help streamline permitting and would help promote investment in mining and would help and ensure that mines were being able to develop on public lands across the nation, things like that. So I've got, I promised I wouldn't go on too long, so I'm just going to flag just a couple for you in terms of regulatory issues that impact all of us beyond the mining industry, and that stand in the way of continuing the benefits that I outlined and growing more deposits across Alaska and certainly in Southeast. One of those, the biggest ones, I think that we have spoken at the Southeast Conference level about this, certainly in the Southeast Conference Mining Committee, is something called Waters of the U.S. And because it's so annoying to talk about, we put a fun acronym on it called WOTUS. And the Waters of the U.S. is a regulation of water and a definition of water that has been changed ad nauseum for about 3 decades. It's had Supreme Court rulings that has dictated how waters within the United States, which of course across Alaska, we have nothing but, how they should be treated and how projects trying to develop should be treated in terms of regulating in water. And we have seen massive proposed rule changes for that, including as recently as the beginning of 2020, when we had the Navigable Waters Protection Rule put in place. That has been rolled back by the Biden administration. And again, we find ourselves debating with completely unclear guidance from the agencies that we work with on what constitutes a water of the US and how you're supposed to behave when you're in or near one. So whether you are looking to develop a mine, whether you are looking to have a seafood processing plant, a hydroelectric facility, what have you, this is something that when you have constant changes to the regulatory arena, it makes it very difficult to plan your projects accordingly. So this is something I will continue to advise from the mining industry perspective, Jan and Robert and others on as we navigate yet one more change on that level. And then the other, just to flag, is of course the plan and the existing now proposed non-exemption of the roadless rule for the Tongass. And I'm certain Tessa is going to get into this in more detail and probably do a much better job than I would, but I just want to touch on that for a moment to talk about how much that impacts mining. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm constantly surprised when I speak with members of the media or just am reading various interviews on how this is just projected as a timber issue and not affecting other uses of the Tongass National Forest. And I would contend that the current administrations and any real regulation of how the Tongass National Forest is managed really does impact our ability to operate, our ability to expand our operations, our ability to even do exploration in remote areas of the Tongass, whether that's a small field season or a long-term exploration, like you're going to hear from some of the other panelists today. But how the lands are used, how inventory roadless areas are reviewed, and how just any aspect of the Tongass National Forest is looked at in terms of whether a roadless exemption is appropriate, which I know we all contend it is, does really impact our ability to grow and look at those, what are nearly 150 locatable mineral deposits in the Tongass. So I do appreciate Southeast Conference and Alaska Forest Association and all of you that are here listening to me today as we continue to fight that fight to make sure that we can use that forest as it was intended in a multiple use manner, including looking at how we can grow mining in it. So like I said, you've got great speakers following me. I'm looking forward to hearing from them. I'm not sure how you're going to do Q&A, Robert, but I am very excited to take any questions you may have now or after the panel is done. I'll be on, and I wish I was in and not on, and I appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we'll hold questions till after we go through the panel. So we'll bring you back at that point. So, and gentlemen, you feel free to either speak from here, or if you want to take the lectern. I'm not sure who else got slides or wanted to jumping jacks, but we're going to go next to our breakfast host sponsor and resident You're still exploring, so.
Resident explorer.
A
Yeah.
resident explorer, and so, and feel free to take the mask off if you would like to for clarity of words, but Garfield has been a part of this community's efforts for, your first visit here was 97?
97, yes, when we made the deal on the Palmer project with Merrill.
And so.
And actually, I first looked at the project in 1990, and we tried to acquire it initially in 1993. So it goes way back.
Well, our partnership has been since 1997 when we first met, and we've been renewing our 5-year plan ever since. And we're excited to see the process that's gone forward, because you've been very inclusive with the community and very transparent as far as what's happening. That's been appreciated, and I think a model for exploration work. But thank you for joining us today, and everyone's excited to hear where things are at and where this new mine is in the making. So good morning.
Well, good morning to everyone. Thank you, Robert. And it's great to be here for the Southeast Conference in Haines. It's close to obviously our project that's just up the road. And so that's, yeah, it's an honor to be here and an honor to sponsor this morning's breakfast. Robert's introduction, it comes back to 1999 when we actually made our first drill hole discovery at Palmer on what's now known as the RWS. And at that time, we were so excited about it, we had a 5-year plan to production. So obviously this takes time. These projects take time and effort and really lots of expenditure to get them to a place where ultimately they're even being considered for their mining potential. So it's been a long road, and you know, certainly a very interesting one. We've always been very involved and very in touch, tried to keep very in touch with the community, because in the end, any operation that you have here is going to be about the community. The community is going to be they're going to have the people that are going to run the project are going to be coming from this community. And so it's absolutely essential that we do the best job we can to help the community understand this project. And we are always available in that sense to do that. So with that in mind, I think, you know, I'm just going to walk you kind of through the project, what we're doing right now, and kind of what we see happening down the road. And maybe there's one slide I think I got here. What do I have to do? Yeah, you know, I think it's really important for the people of Haines to realize they're in one of the world's great mineral belts. There's a huge amount of opportunity. Now, this doesn't take me all the way down to the south where Bocan Mountain is, or Niblack, or many other opportunities. This is kind of the north end of a great mineral belt. And Greens Creek itself is one of the world's highest grade VM deposits of the type that Palmer is. If you go into Canada, there's the huge Windy Craggy deposit, which I know people in Haines are familiar with, and it's one of the largest VMS deposits in the world that now sits in a park, you know, unable to be developed. So Palmer's in that same belt of rocks we call the Alexander terrain that has lots of potential, and these are deposits that we know with the current technologies, you can understand the environment, you can understand the elements you need to do what's required to build an environmentally sound project, a sustainable project that doesn't have any major impacts on the environment. So I think that's really important. And it's really important to understand that from what I understand, if you look at the long-term record of mining in Alaska, there's no, I know of no cases where the mining industry has killed a fish. You know, I don't think there's one situation in Alaska where the mining industry has actually killed a fish over the history of lode mining in Alaska. So, you know, it's important to realize that Alaska's had a very good track record, and they have a very, very, very demanding permitting system to get through to the point where you actually permit a mine. So with that in mind, in what we're doing this year, and as I say, we like to see it as a new mine in the making. We're not there yet, but that's our objective, is to build a very successful mining operation out in the Glacier Creek. And so that's kind of where our efforts are really being directed now. We've got enough resource, we've got our arms around enough resource that you can justify addressing the economics and the permitting phases more and more. So this year, with our partners, DOA Metals and Mining, they funded an $8.8 million US budget funds are still being spent with. The objective of that program this year was very environmentally focused. One of the things that was important to us is to understand the hydrology, both in the underground environment that we are planning to do some underground exploration, but also in Glacier Creek Valley, where we're planning a land application discharge for the original underground exploration. And so understanding the environment of this discharge has been a focus for us. And in that regard, we've been drilling what are called sonic, it's a sonic drill that drills holes through the overburden where you actually can recover and examine the nature of the overburden to give us a good idea of what that's like, what the water conductivity of that the overburden is. And we drill these holes right to bedrock. We put monitoring wells in I think in something like 8 holes, we've put established monitoring wells this year so that we can document the water quality over time in all of these monitoring wells. So any of the discharge that we're doing, you immediately kind of see what's going on or very soon after. So that's been a huge focus this year. We've certainly one of the challenges this year in industry wide has been maintaining drill crews, especially diamond drill crews. And I think across the state, there's been lots of competition for crews. And so we've had to adjust our core drilling part of the program somewhat to really, again, focus on completing the key environmental drill holes that we want to get done that ultimately will feed into our feasibility study permitting. So in essence, our efforts this year have been very much directed to understanding the environment, to be able to come up with the most solid environmental kind of plan, taking the project forward to an underground phase. So with that in mind, where are we going from here? Well, as I say, all of this work is directed towards ultimately making a mine out of the resource that we see at Palmer right now. We see the opportunity for a lot more resource, and as we go down the road, we will continue to have a major exploration effort, or plan to, in conjunction with the development and permitting that's required to get us down the road to what is called pre-feasibility or a feasibility study. So right now, what we've got is a PEA that's out in the public that allows people to kind of say, well, this is what they're kind of thinking right now. It's open for criticism, and there's always lots of criticisms, and all these criticisms ultimately help to reconsider elements that are in this very preliminary plan. But what it does do is it gives you the essence. Is this project going to be robust enough to actually ultimately be a mine? And so we saw from our PEA, we saw the evidence that yes, we've got the ingredients here to justify spending a lot more money to see if we've got a feasible project. And it does take a lot of money, and it's a lot of risk money until you actually get to the point of a feasibility study that's positive. You can get a feasibility study that's negative, and it tells you, well, you can't justify production right now. So what we're looking for really is a positive feasibility study to make a construction decision 5 years down the road. So it is a process, and it's you know, and there's steps that you go along, and there's lots of time for community involvement and community concepts, community ideas. Very important for us for the community to understand the project as best they can and voice their concerns and have us kind of, you know, satisfy you that this project is solid and very meaningful to the community. So as we look down the road, we're with a plan for an underground exploration program in 2023. That's when we would like to kick it into gear, permitting allowing us to do that. So to do that, there's a bunch of environmental reporting and permits, additional permits that are required from the DEC to advance the project to that stage. Information we've collected this year is now being integrated into reports that will allow us to do that. And so next year, things that we need to have in place to go underground in 2023 include a construction camp. They include upgrading the switchback part of the road right up to where the portal site is. That'll be a major construction project next year. Preparing the portal site itself for underground as early as we possibly can in 2023. So that's a big step that we're going to be doing next year. In conjunction with that, though, we also will be continuing to carry out additional and collecting additional environmental information. That's an ongoing process, geotech data and water quality monitoring and water flow data. That's an ongoing process where we build up our database. And ongoing resource upgrade. A bunch of our resource right now is inferred. That's got to be upgraded to indicated for to complete a feasibility study. So that's going to be a major effort again next year, as well as a very substantial surface drill program. And ultimately that leads us then with that preparation, which is going to be a major expenditure next year. We're working on budgets right now, but significantly more than this year's $8.8 million budget, much significantly more. And so once we get into the underground phase, then there's obviously very large expenditures at that point in time for the underground development. There's about a total of 2,400 meters of underground development that gets us into the hanging wall of the deposit. And from there, it enables us to drill off the deeper part of the deposit from underground to increase that part of the resource to indicated, excuse me, which is required to get us to feasibility, which, as I say, we expect to see that 4 to 5 years away. And so the underground, it's important to understand that this underground, it's exploration. We're still not at the point of saying we've got a mine or not, but it's an essential part of the feasibility of the information that will be required in a really solid feasibility study, because it gives you firsthand information on the rock quality that you're going to be working in. It gives you much more detailed information on the underground hydrology. And so it's just a very important part of the feasibility. And so that's the process to get us to this feasibility point where you're collecting and you pull all of this data together that we've been collecting over the years to determine the ultimate economics of the project. And so the underground program, 2 years, starting in 2023, that takes us out to 2025. We've got all that information that allows us to do a feasibility study. So another year to probably get all the reporting or stuff done for the feasibility study to determine whether you make it and the permitting as well, but to determine whether you can make a construction decision. And so that's our story right now. And that's where we're heading. We want to make a mine. We don't have a mine yet, but we feel that it's robust enough project that we've got a lot of confidence that we can do this project and make it a mine and do it right. So yeah, with that.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Garfield. And I was excited because you heard it here first. For the first time in 22 years, he said 4 to 5 years. So now we've moved the needle. We've moved the needle. It's not just a 5-year plan out there. We're excited to hear that. We'll have we'll circle back for some questions after we get through the rest of our panelists. But you know, we've heard throughout the week, almost everyone, policy level, state and federal government has mentioned the critical rare earth minerals that are deposited within our state, and particularly in our region. They've called out Spokane Mountain numerous times, and it's great to have a face to put to that name in that company. And so Mike has been on a number of our committee meetings by Zoom, but he spent the week with us here. He's the vice president and chief operating officer for UCOR Rare Metals, and he's going to give us an update on where things are at on their twin path forward for project development and all the facets there. So really excited to have him here and talk about what's next. So good morning, Mike.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here this morning.
And you might have to speak a little closer to that because they really want to hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Can I borrow that clicker?
Sure.
Thank you. So good morning. What I wanted to do this morning was to give you a brief overview of our Alaska 2023 plan. And this is our business model that will get us towards the establishment of a U.S. rare earth supply chain with an Alaska-centric focus. So before we get started, there's a couple things that I need to say. And the first one I'm going to say is that my Toastmaster group suggested that I tell my audience that I have a bit of a stutter. And I suggested to them that I deal with a very bright audiences, and they've already figured that out. So the second thing is, please don't make any investment decisions based on what I say here this morning. These are forward-looking statements. And I've got a lot of slides that I put together for us. I'm going to touch on them. I'm not going to dive into details, but I just wanted you to be able to walk away with additional information from this meeting. So UCOR was founded in approximately 2006. In 2007, they shifted towards uranium, and then by 2009, that shift landed us in rare earths. And the way that UCOR operates right now is we have the parent company, UCOR Rare Metals, Inc. We have a subsidiary that we purchased last year in May of 2020, Innovations Metal Corporation. And they brought a scientific team and a technology called Rapid SX. And the SX stands for solvent extraction, which is the universal method around the world to separate rare earth oxides from each other and the gangue material that they're found with. So with that, what we did is Innovation Metals Corporation operates as an independent entity, and they're focused right now on taking the work that they did in the laboratory and at pilot scale. And they actually have a commercial demonstration facility for Rapid SX in Kingston, Ontario, that is taking place right now. And they are working on the rolling out the commercial deployment of Rapid SX. On a parallel track, we also have UCOR and Alaska SMC LLC. Alaska SMC LLC is the Alaska entity that is going to develop the Alaska Strategic Metals Complex, which is going to be a rare earth processing center in Southeast, and will eventually be the processing center for the Spokane project once it comes to fruition. So. And then with regard to how UCOR is structured right now, we're headquartered in Halifax, Nova Scotia. In 2020, Pat Ryan was our chairman, and he stepped in as CEO of UCOR. And Pat is also the founder of Neocon International, a Halifax, Nova Scotia, Tier 1 automotive supply chain supplier that services all the major Western world auto manufacturers around the world. Pat has over 400 employees and numerous plants throughout North America that he built from the ground up. So with a leader like Pat at our helm, we definitely know that he's the guy that's going to take us to a production model as the electrification of vehicles takes hold around the world. And a little bit about myself. I'm the only employee of UCOR that resides in the United States, and I make my home in New Hampshire. I first came to Alaska at 30 years old with a young family to work at the Ketchikan shipyard around Christmas of '96 with the plan of staying here forever. We left 2 years after that. But I caught the Alaska spirit and spent the next 15 years traveling back and forth as a consulting engineer. I've been with UCOR for about 6 years, and along with our board, Pat and Peter Manuel, our CFO, I helped to establish and implement the strategic vision for UCOR, which currently boils down to disrupting the Chinese dominance in the rare earth supply chain. And what many of you may not know is that the US used to dominate the rare earth supply chain. Up until about the early 90s, the US mined and processed more than 3 times rare earths than anywhere else in the world. And that slowly changed over the course, well, it didn't slowly change, it rapidly changed. What ended up happening was that by about 2001, China had taken most of that. I'm going to jump to another slide while I'm on this thought. So China had taken the processing that was being done in the United States and did it much, much less expensively by cutting corners than we could do in the United States with our strict environmental standards. So what you'll see here, I've jumped to the solution, is that UCOR is focused on the middle market, which is the processing of rare earth elements. Right now, there is one mine in America that processes, or I'm sorry, mines rare earths. And those ores are mined, they're slightly concentrated, and they're shipped to China for processing. And the United States does not see anything else to do with those rare earths again. They go into the Chinese supply chain. So what UCOR's focus is yes, we have the Bocan project, and I'll jump back to that. We have been exploring Bocan since approximately 2007. We have a PEA that we developed after about $35 million of investment into the project, where we did extensive exploration, and then that all happened on the tail end of a crash in rare earth prices. So since about this PEA was done in 2013, and since that time, rare earth prices have been fairly low, and not to the point where building the mine made sense. But what the process did highlight for us is that the most critical aspect of the rare earth supply chain is taking back that mid-market and taking control of processing rare earths, because if you can process the rare earths, you can control the market. So what that means is that we spent a lot of time, energy, and money to develop a processing technology. And from that out came the ultimate acquisition of Innovation Metals Corporation and their Rapid SX technology. The other elements of the supply chain are the upstream, which is the feedstock at some point in the future that will be Bocan. But then you also have, there's other US allies around the world that all they want to do is mine the ore and turn it into a concentrate and sell that to the market. So what we have done is our Alaska 2023 business plan is two-pronged. We have the long-term view of developing the Bocan project, and we have the near-term view of developing the processing center first. And by developing the processing center first, what that allows us to do is establish the customer network that will be needed to ultimately get the mine online, because once you start mining, we'll know exactly where it will be processed and who's going to buy the product. So let me go to another slide here. So that's what this slide it represents, is that there's the opportunity. What is the opportunity? The North America has no commercial rare earth refining right now. North America has no rare earth metal and alloy making right now. And the most critical of the rare earth permanent magnets that you hear about on the news, that are in your telephones, that are in your vehicles, it's called a neodymium iron boron magnet. And that is what is synonymous with a rare earth magnet. That's the most powerful type of rare earth magnets. There's some other grades of magnets, but they're not as strong. They're not as efficient. The vehicle range would drop down. So when auto manufacturers are looking for rare earth magnets, this is what they are looking for. And there's four primary elements that are in a rare earth permanent magnet, and that's neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. And those are the four most sought after rare earths around the world. Two of those, dysprosium and terbium, are considered heavy rare earths, and those are found at Bocan Mountain. So the other half of this is, what's the challenge? Well, the challenge is to overcome the current supply network that China has established. And what China has done is China is going to do what is best for China. And China wants to manufacture all the vehicles that are made in the world and sell those everywhere else, just like the other products that you see in various stores. So what they have done is they have coerced industries that rely on these elements to locate their facilities, their IP, and their technology in China. So we, along with several OEMs in North America, recognize that we have to react quickly. We have to be in a position where the strong US manufacturing base that exists now remains a strong US manufacturing base, and that we have a complete supply chain that is independent of the Chinese. And Pat Ryan and I talk with OEMs every week, and we are aligned in that thinking. They want to have an ex-China solution for a rare earth supply chain. So we are very encouraged by where things stand now, but at the pace of acceleration that we expect to happen every day. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So that gets us back here to the solution and Ucor's vision of a domestic rare earth supply chain. On the very left side, that's your upstream. So eventually that would be Bocan Mountain, where we would extract ore and we would produce a mineral concentrate. What we're doing now is we're working on that, and I'll talk about that a bit more. But we're also establishing those relationships that we need for U.S. allied rare earth concentrate that we could feed directly into the Alaska SMC, which is the middle section there. And then on the right, what OEMs actually want is what they're accustomed to is picking up the telephone and saying, I need a dashboard. And that they have tier one suppliers around the world that make that dashboard. Well, what they're finding is that for electrification, not only can you not find the the motor that you need, you can't find the magnet that you need in America. And not only that, you can't find the raw materials that you need to make the magnet in America. So but before they dealt with tier 1 suppliers, now they're having to dip way down the supply chain to perhaps a tier 5 supplier. There's a recent example where GM made a deal with a lithium company that is not mining yet, and they're not in production yet, but they made a deal all the way to the source for lithium on the understanding that is going to develop for them. So it's a totally new world for anybody that's involved in the rare earth supply chain, including the OEMs that set these targets that we're going to have 30 million electric vehicles by 2030. Well, they make that statement, and now they have to figure out where are the raw materials going to come from. So I don't want to dwell too much on this chart, but I talked about those 4 elements, and this is the chart of the magnet rare earths, the supply and the demand. The supply is in blue and the demand is in gray. And what that line is on the left that goes downward, that's the deficit. And what you'll see there is that by the end of this decade, there's going to be at least 17,000 tons of rare earth magnet oxides that are missing from the supply chain. What UCOR is trying to do is to fill some of that gap. And what I also note is that these charts change a lot. This chart was dated earlier this year, and I'm virtually certain it'll be more severe, at the next issue versus what it is now. So what are the rare earths? They're elements that help create more efficient magnets. They are used in a variety of aspects in your cars. I'm going to focus strictly on the electric motors and the permanent magnets that are in those. And so our two-pronged attack is the short-term development of the Alaska Strategic Metals Complex, which we call the Alaska SMC, and that's to get to processing those metals now. And then we have the long-term vision of the development of the Bocan Mountain Complex. As I've said, our focus is on feed, finding that feed to feed the plant, the technology, and then the market. Where are these other sources of rare earths that we're going to get while we're waiting for the development of Bocan? There are numerous deposits around the world, and we have spoken to approximately 80% of the entities on this screen. There's others that are not on the screen that we've spoken to. We have some agreements in place right now where we're looking at getting some testing done for these feedstocks. So that's all accelerating quite nicely. So here are some details about the Alaska SMC. What we're doing right now, as I said, is we're trying to establish a facility that we can get that customer network built, so we know where we're going to be selling our products to. And our products are individually separated rare earth oxides. And we're initially looking at a 2,000-ton facility. Our business model calls for designing this plant from the very beginning to where the building, which we call the facility, can house a 2,000-ton plant within that facility and rapidly expand to 5,000 tons without changing the footprint of the building. And the technology that we're using, which is Rapid SX, it allows us to accomplish that because it is so much more efficient than conventional SX process. We want to locate the facility in Southeast Alaska. We have targeted the Ketchikan area. It's on a worldwide shipping corridor. It has close proximity to Prince Rupert, to Seattle via barge and rail, and other deposits potentially in Alaska and in Canada. So real quick, this is based on an economic model that we did for the Alaska SMC that we actually shared with Ada, who we are working towards a partnership with. This just shows that for developing the Alaska SMC first before the mine, it would probably be about 65 construction jobs over a course of 2 years. And then once we get into operation and we're going around the clock, we're looking about 65 jobs with a $5 million a year payroll. So then I'm going to switch a little bit to Bocan Mine. I'm actually going out to the Bocan project next week, and I should clarify that it's not actually a mine yet. It's a mineral resource. But I'm going out there next week to start a program where we're going to upgrade our resource, which is currently approximately 80% indicated and 20% inferred. And we're going to be able to take the 80% indicated and upgrade that to about 20% measured, which increases the confidence that the geologists have in saying this is exactly what's there. So we'll start that next week, and we'll do some field mapping, and then next year we will send a team out there that will take additional channel sampling and bulk sampling. And what the bulk sampling is going to allow us to do, we're going to bring back approximately 50 tons of bulk material to Ketchikan, and we will store it there so that when we do see that economic threshold at the point where we say, okay, go on the Bocan mine, that we can then take that ore, or I'm sorry, that mineralized material and start a piloting project, which will follow a project that's underway right now at SGS Canada, where we are re-envisioning the mill flow sheet that we developed in the preliminary economic assessment, which was done in 2013. So what we're doing at SGS is we are adding co-products to the rare earth mix, so that we can take economic advantage of those products, lower that threshold where it makes sense to get started at the Bocan project at the site. So that's our hope. And then the other thing that I wanted to show here is that people talk about that Bocan is a relatively small deposit. Well, it is, but we have only explored a relatively small area of the Bocan Mountain complex, which historically consists of approximately 9 mineralized zone areas. We've worked on one area, the Bocan Dotson Ridge. So once we get started with our eventual mining, the plan would be to also start with additional exploration concurrent with that mining. And then this was a report that the McDowell Group did back in 2013. And it just shows the number of jobs that are associated with Bocan and the processing facility. We've updated these numbers to current day prices, but other than that, we did not change the methodology, and the McDowell Group is now the McKinley Group. So this is Rapid SX. There's many advantages, not the least of which it requires a smaller footprint. It doesn't use as much electricity. Each one of those tanks on the right has an impeller that is driven by a motor. We don't have any of that with our process. So it's the same chemistry as solvent extraction. We're just applying it in a more efficient manner through physics. So I just wanted to end on this slide. UCOR is extremely grateful to our Alaska partners, the federal congressional delegation, Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, and Congressman Young, Governor Dunleavy and his team. We've been working with the Alaska development team, Fred Villa and John Springsteen. We've been working with the ADA team, Alan Weissner, Morgan Neff, Sam Tappan, and the ADA board. We received indications of support from State Senator Bert Stedman and State Representative Dan Ortiz, the Ketchikan Gateway Borough Assembly, and Mayor Dial. We're working with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources on our Bocan issues. And then, of course, the Alaska representatives of the U.S. Forest Service. And last but not least, I wanted to turn it back to Robert and thank him and the Southeast Conference for supporting us all along here. And with that, I'd like to make an announcement with Robert.
Well, why don't you go ahead and speak to that, and then as you characterize that, I'll just jump in. How's that?
That sounds great.
So, we're very excited to support the mining industry. We have a long history of help. We go back to even Hecla's days. Right now you get a producing mine as a going concern, boom, they're the little city on the hill, and they're moving forward. But back in the day, when they were looking for power, Southeast Conference was on the front lines to investigate what kind of entity would form to support that and how to get that intertie built over there. And so it was our board of directors led by David Stone and JC Connolly that really helped to discover, and Dave Carlson, our energy coordinator, to develop what sort of joint action agency or structure would be best to do that. And that's where the Quan entity came that owns that intertie and supported that effort. The front end is where we're often able to help with some of those details. We worked with the Kensington folks all the way up to the Supreme Court, and Garfield knows that we're standing by to help us execute the 5-year plan. And so we're always interested in ways that we can assist the establishment of these economic engines in the region, all of them that we've talked about all week long. But when we got into discussions as to what the next steps might be for UCOR and the needs that they might have for infrastructure in Southeast, because you saw the global reach of where this could happen, and this facility could happen pretty much anywhere. But I think it ought to be in, everybody here agree it should be in Southeast Alaska? Okay. So the board of directors for Southeast Conference has looked over this memorandum of agreement and has authorized me to sign. And Mike, your board has looked at this?
My board has looked at this, and we are very excited to partner with Southeast Conference for the establishment of a natural resource development complex in Southeast Alaska. And what that means is that Southeast Conference will assist us in establishing a location, the land, and the building, which I call the facility, that we can then build the Alaska SMC plant within that facility. And so that's the vision that we've established with Southeast Conference. And I'm very pleased to execute this agreement on behalf of UCOR with Southeast Conference.
And so with that, Mike, why don't you join me up here, and we'll make this historic moment happen. We have the signatory pages here, and first line is yours, sir.
All right, thank you. I have my own pen.
Well, there we go. We're COVID appropriate all the time. And on behalf of the board of directors and the members gathered here virtually and all throughout Southeast Alaska,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, and we're going to keep going and exploring the wealth that surrounds us. We have next up, we have Tessa Axelson, who is the CEO for Executive Director for the Alaska Forest Association. And she is going to beam in from Ketchikan. She's a lifelong Alaskan. She has been involved with resource and business development for many, many, many years. And we're just excited to have her joining us here. And we have her here. There she is.
Morning, Robert.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you. And
Thank you.
look forward to your remarks.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the panel today, to follow the speakers, and really just, I'm clapping in the background for the announcement from UCOR. I was thinking on how important it is now, as it has ever been, that our economy in Southeast is diversified. We think that timber is part of that, but how critical it is that all of the announcements that we've heard at the conference, from Senator Sullivan's comments on what the NOAA facility is going to mean in a place like Ketchikan, to what it means that UCOR and Southeast Conference are working on activities to identify site, to have really critical jobs that are meaning tax base, reinvestment in our communities, to see the improvements that we are so thankful to see in our cruise industry as a result of what we've all been working through over the course of the pandemic. But really, as at no time before, it's so important that we have diversification in our economy, because what it means is in our communities across Southeast that individuals are purchasing homes, they're enrolling kiddos in school, they're contributing to the tax base. And we in the forest industry wish that we were doing more work and employing more folks. The unfortunate story that Southeast Conference has heard for some time, and will continue to hear today, is that there has never been greater wealth in our national forests that is being squandered by lack of use. And so what we know is that, particularly in Southeast Alaska, in the Tongass National Forest, while the debate continues and certainly has re-emerged with the Biden administration, less than 1% of the Tongass National Forest has actively been harvested. There is much that could be done to continue to harvest. We are going to remain very challenged in working with our federal partners, the Forest Service, to ensure that the Forest Association and its membership is receiving the amount of supply that we need. Just by way of a quick summary, as you all know, the forest industry in Alaska, and in particularly in Southeast Alaska, is very different than what some members of the media would have you believe, and the story of the industry from 2 decades ago. There are no longer large-scale mill operations remaining in Alaska. The only remaining medium-sized mill is operated by Viking over on Prince of Wales Island. And so really what we're talking about is a handful of small businesses that are operating in a variety of manners in Southeast Alaska. Those businesses are employing, as you heard from Raincoast and Meilani when she did her update, approximately 400 individuals in the timber industry. We anticipate that that number will decrease in 2022, and that's as a result of a couple of things, one of which is the decision in January of this year by Sealaska to pivot and no longer engage in logging activities on their lands in Southeast Alaska. So we're going to see a decrease. The challenge that we face in our industry is multifold. One, certainly there are workforce development challenges that we face, ensuring that we can find the right folks with the right training. There is not a large group of folks that are entering forestry as a training across the country and certainly in Alaska. So having skilled foresters, having folks that are available to go into the workforce for timber is something that we're challenged by. But most importantly, it's really this issue of supply. So for our operators who are working in a unique industry that also has a very boutique customer base, the Alaska Forest Association membership primarily is an export market. We are working with customers in the Asian markets for very specific needs. And these are predominantly specific kinds of wood, mostly old growth, and some young growth. That's part of the transition plan that is utilized for custom interior construction, for some exterior construction, and then is also used for things like the vast majority of all the fine musical instruments in the world are constructed out of wood that comes from southern Southeast Alaska and the Tongass. And so ensuring that those operators have availability to long-term supply. For us, that's anywhere from 18 to 24 months. The industry needs about 55 million board feet a year. The vast quantity of that historically has come from the U.S. Forest Service. As you all know, less than 1% of land in Alaska is under private ownership. So the Forest Service, round numbers, controls about 75% of the supply that's available. And we are disappointed but not surprised that with transitions in this administration, we yet again have seen attacks on the ability of the timber industry to operate. That's come in two primary forms. First is actions related to roadless. Deantha spoke about that when she talked. We believe that roadless is about access. It's never been about timber, despite what you hear and what people say. It's about ensuring that we have infrastructure in the form of roads, in the form of power lines to our communities, and opportunities also for recreation and other activities that communities need. But we are looking to, once again, we're working on closer to 3 decades than one of political attempts to make transitions in roadless when we know that it's not the right fit for Alaska. It never has been. The Biden administration has announced that they're going to be working actively to repeal and replace the work that the Trump administration did. So that's an unfortunate circumstance. It's also going to be yet again another shift of resources into activities by federal agencies that we really feel should be best focused on work that could be done in the communities and getting supply out. However, the Biden administration, through Secretary Vilsack, who heads USDA, and as a result of that, Forest Service, the Forest Service is a component of USDA, made an announcement this summer, which is referred to as a sustainability initiative. I know that Dave is online and spoke in the first day of the conference on Tuesday about what that looks like. Really, for the forest industry, here's the critical piece of it for us. It results in an immediate halt on all old growth timber harvest in the Tongass. That has a direct effect for our operators on the 3 major sales that we're going to be moving forward from the Forest Service in the next 2 to 5 year timeline. That's Twin Mountains, Central Tongass, and South Ravilla. So what we've been told is those sales will be shelved. They will not move forward. That puts a significant challenge on supply for our operators, while we as an industry, under the Secretary's prior direction under the Obama administration, when he also served as Secretary, have been working to transition our equipment, our trained professionals into young growth. The reality is that the young growth market and the ability of harvest in young growth in Alaska has not been apace with what was assumed it would be. And so there is challenges in shifting entirely to a young growth market. And so we're going to be working actively to continue dialogue with the Forest Service to understand more about how this cap of 5 million board feet, how community consumption, as it's identified in the sustainability initiative, what that will mean for our operators. We're also really pleased to be working with Commissioner Feige and her staff, the new state forester, Helge, who we'll also be hearing from here shortly. The state has really stepped up and is working to ensure that there is a bridge program that can provide operators in Southeast Alaska, in the region, with some of that supply they need. We also were so pleased in the prior weeks to see that the legislatively directed exchange between the Mental Health Trust Authority, the Trust Land Office here in Alaska, and the Forest Service was able to take place. While we were really disappointed that it took as long as it did, close to 4+ years for that exchange to occur, we are so pleased that that has happened and that ensures some additional supply for our operators, and also, and most importantly to communities, additional jobs that we're going to see, construction jobs for roads. For folks that are down in Southern Southeast, you're familiar with the Shelter Cove Road project. So road construction, also work in the woods functionally from our operators that provides those long-term family wage jobs to our communities. Our industry is really proud of the fact that though we've been challenged by supply, by volatility, certainly in the international markets, that we have continued to operate with all of the challenges of COVID and continue to ensure that we're delivering those jobs in communities. Largely, the opportunities that we have are going to be looking to other entities for supply. If we don't see an increase in supply, it makes it really, really challenging for the medium-sized and larger operators in our membership to continue to work. And I think the other piece of this conversation is also that you do have very small operators, individual guys and gals that are running mill operations, and those are critical to the industry. However, they are not supplying the large number of jobs that you see in that report on Southeast by the Numbers. Those are largely supplied by our larger operators. So how do we find that mix between what makes sense, ensuring that the supply that has been committed and promised by the federal agency is available, and then work in partnership with the state, which has been so active recently in stepping up under the commissioner's direction and the governor's direction to ensure that there's a supply that remains for the industry, and figuring out how we bridge the next 2.5 years if there will be significantly diminished sale from the Forest Service to keep operators in business. One other thing that I think I would add, that there's an opportunity for certainly our industry that we'll be actively engaged with our other industry partners and then with Southeast Conference. I know that the regional forester spoke about this, but that sustainability initiative also includes some other components in addition to the halt on old growth. It includes a set aside of about $25 million. The agency is in the process now of gathering information, looking for feedback, looking for projects. They have shared that initiative process on their website, Forest Service website. There's a link to how to participate. There was an open house held yesterday in the afternoon and the evening. I really encourage community leaders, folks at Southeast Conference, and certainly the industry folks that are connected to AFA to be aware of that process. Let's ensure that, number one, we keep the timber industry operating, but two, that those funds, as they are available, are directed to our communities and to projects in a way that really continues to support that diversification of our economy. I just wanted to share also briefly that for us on the state side, we'll also be looking at a couple pieces of key legislation that will be moving forward over the course of this next upcoming legislative session. Those relate to some changes to the BIF and FLUP process within DNR's Division of Forestry. And so we'll be working on some of those items and then trying to keep you aware of other issues that are coming down for us as an industry. As always, we're incredibly grateful for the work that our delegation does, the work of Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, and Congressman Young and their staff in the state. So pleased to see Chad in his new role with the senator. We go back to what is now a couple decades ago, I think, Chad, when I was first at the commission. So it's always so great to see people who are in Alaska transitioning into new roles within the state. That's good for our industry. It's good for business. It's good for Southeast Conference. It's good for our state in general. And then also certainly our state partners, Senator Stedman, who's been a longtime supporter of the timber industry, Representative Ortez in Ketchikan, Southern Southeast, and then the governor's office, and most specifically Commissioner Feige and Helge for the work that they're doing to support the industry. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and update you. As always, I wish that I had more positive news. I think if I could, certainly I would be there in person. Unfortunately, I had a sick kiddo who was not able to go to school because of current COVID protocols. So I wish that I had been there, but I'm appreciative of having an opportunity to speak with you all this morning. I think one final thing that I would add that I know other industry folks have commented on, and I know I've heard Robert talk about before, and that's just really, it's all of our jobs to ensure that we are helping to tell the true story of what industry and development and its important and link to communities is in Alaska. A lot of that story is told for us by external parties who are misinformed or who have agendas that are pretty specific. And so just continuing to be mindful of how we tell the story, what that relationship is to our communities, and that specifically is really important for the timber industry. So thanks so much, Robert. I appreciate the opportunity, and we'll look forward to hearing from others on the panel this morning.
All right, thank you so much, Tessa, and I'm glad that you could beam in and give us that update, and we certainly will continue to work alongside of you in the days ahead. Just to assure folks, if you're looking at watches, we've got plenty of time. We don't have to start the business meeting at the time that's printed, and it's going to be short anyway. We're going to have buses and transportation and plenty of time to hear from someone that is new to Southeast Alaska, is new to Alaska, and very much a part of our economy, both throughout the state, throughout the region, but here in Haines as well. So very relevant. Helge is the as you see right there, the director state forester. He comes from California, where he spent about 21 years and was, I think, last deputy forester there as well. So a long career in forestry. And he's been able to spend the last couple of days with us to kind of get to know us a little bit. And now we get a chance to hear from him as well. And then we'll take a couple questions afterwards if we can. So welcome, Helge, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Robert. I'm actually kind of hidden behind the pillar here, so I think
Oh,
I'll
why
step
don't
up to
you,
the
yeah,
lectern.
come on up.
So the last speaker on the last panel on the last day of the conference, that's always a bit of a challenge, but you're a great crowd, and I think you share my enthusiasm for the timber industry. So I think it's going to be interesting. So first of all, shameless plug for our very own Haines State Forest. Aptly named. It's right here in our own backyard. 286,000 acres, co-located with the Bald Eagle Preserve. It's one of 3 state forests in the state managed by the Division of Forestry. We also have the Southeast State Forest down in Ketchikan and the Tanana Valley State Forest in Fairbanks. So what is a state forest managed by the Division of Forestry? I'm sure a lot of you haven't really heard about state forest. They are essentially working forests. Their primary purpose is timber management to provide for utilization, production of timber resources. That's our legal mandate. So timber harvesting occurs regularly. We do adhere to the principle of sustained yield. So essentially, we harvest less than what we're growing each year. Trees are like kids, they grow. And so they put on growth every year. So as long as you harvest less than growth every year, you would be able to provide that level of harvest forever without depleting ecosystem resources or impair ecosystem function. Bit of an oversimplification, but it kind of gets the point across. It's incredibly important when it comes to managing our resources in the Southeast, because these trees, these forests, these ecosystems are going to be here long after we're gone. And our kids and grandkids will judge us depending on how we manage them today. Another thing about state forests is we are land managers, not asset managers. So we are not so much managing the state forest for maximum revenue. We are maximizing them for maximum, we are managing them for maximum productivity and essentially ecological stewardship. We do a lot of thinning for wildlife diversity and habitat and ecosystem diversity. We practice silviculture, not logging. Logging is simply the end stage of harvesting the crop. We manage forests from the very beginning, planting seedlings, thinning the forest, and nursing it to maturity. We manage on a rotation of about 120 years. So that means that once we harvest in an area, it will have 120 years to recover and recuperate. So as most of you know, if you live here, recreation is a significant land use on the Haines State Forest. And we'd like to do more of that and work with the recreationists to essentially work with us when we plan roads and timber sales to maximize recreation use so that we can have truly a multiple use forest where snowmobilers, hikers, mountain bikers can use the roads that we put in. So we want to put them in a place within reason that makes sense, not just for timber management, but also for recreation. And lastly, we do have a timber sale ready to go on the Haines State Forest, the Baby Brown sale, about 22 million board feet. It will start next summer and will contribute a significant amount of revenue to the local economy. So here's just a map of the state forest and the Bald Eagle Preserve going down the middle. I'm sure a lot of you know a lot more about that than I do. And the Southeast State Forest beside that. So down to the business at hand. What is the role of the timber sector in the Alaska economy, Southeast Alaska economy? We've heard from a lot of speakers. Melanie on Tuesday mentioned that timber used to be the largest sector of the economy back in the day. Then it was replaced by fisheries, then tourism, and finally healthcare. And I think it's clear that we will probably not have timber go back to the level of dominance that it was at when old growth logging was king in Southeast Alaska. But I think it's equally clear that timber can and should be an integral part of the diverse basket of economic sectors in the Southeast, because trees grow incredibly fast in Southeast Alaska. You may take it for granted if you live here, but they don't always grow that fast everywhere. In fact, us foresters like to rank areas on the globe for productivity because we're foresters. And the Redwood region in Northern California is probably the most productive forest in the world in terms of total biomass, tons of biomass per acre. However, Southeast Alaska is right up there. And it's a temperate rainforest. The amount of biomass that it can support on any given acre is really fantastic. And so it would be a shame to not use this resource that's right in our backyard. And the challenge is really, how do we make the timber sector a integral part of the economy? Again, the statistics that we've seen for Southeast Alaska that I picked up made the point that it's a sector in decline, financially speaking. That's not uncommon. The timber sector is notoriously cyclical, so that should not stop us. The supply and demand equation will change, and there currently is quite a demand for lumber, and lumber prices are at a record high. So we have real opportunity to build a sector, and I think that's been reflected already during this conference. Senator Murkowski, Senator Young, Senator Sullivan, Anthony Malott from Alaska, they all mentioned timber as part of Southeast Alaska's economy. So it's really a resource we cannot afford not to utilize. And young growth working forest is really where it's at. Old growth is coming to an end. It's a non-renewable resource. We are never going to grow 300-year-old trees again. Well, we might, but not on a large scale. Another key is really domestic value-added processing. We want local jobs. We want the resilient, diverse rural economies that are characteristic of Southeast Alaska. And we want stable, well-paid jobs in all aspects of the value-added chain. That can only be achieved if the logs are processed locally. Clearly, there is a place for exporting raw logs, but we need that diversity. So I think the challenge is really, how do you attract more investments in wood processing infrastructure in Southeast Alaska? if we are successful, when we are successful in doing that, it's kind of like build it and they'll come, because we really do have an incredible resource here, and it's high value lumber. Yellow cedar and red cedar are priced throughout the world for their characteristics. So it's a no-brainer. And lastly, we need to convince our customers that we are practicing sustainable harvest, ecologically responsible silviculture. Silviculture is the art and science of growing trees. It's like agriculture and viticulture and mariculture, growing trees. It's more than just harvesting. It's really maximizing the ecological health and at the same time growing a high value crop. And lastly, of course, recreation, equally important. Tourism industry is huge in this area, and we need to be able to coexist with that industry. And it does make a difference where you put your harvest units on the landscape. And just one more thing that I should mention is, as Tessa pointed out, the Forest Service and the Park Service together make up about almost 90% of the land ownership in the Southeast. It's a fact, and so the remaining landowners are really slivers. It's the state of Alaska, the Division of Forestry, State Forests, Mental Health Trust, Mining Lands and Water, a few other landowners, private, of course, native corporations. So the pie chart looks kind of overwhelming, but given the land base of Alaska, the small slivers on that pie chart can still contribute to a real and meaningful economic sector in the Southeast. And I should also make the point that the Forest Service, like all of us, changes over time. And we, the Division of Forestry, actually have an excellent working relationship with the Tongass National Forest and the Forest Service. They are good neighbors. They want to do the right thing. It's an evolving political process, as you know, but there is $25 million coming, as Tessa mentioned, as an effort to stimulate local industries and local activities. And we want to be part of that. And the Forest Service has started their Southeast Alaska Sustainability Strategy, SAS for short. And they had their first public meeting yesterday. And they will continue to take public comments until, I believe, October 18. So I would certainly encourage you to put in your comments about how you think the Tongass National Forest should be managed. But I can't stress that enough, that we may disagree on politics, but land management on the ground on the Tongass National Forest has always been exemplary, and they are good neighbors. So in terms of ecological and environmental safeguards, like the mining industry, we have some of the highest protection standards in the world. And I think it's reassuring that the Forest Resources and Practice Act has really significant safeguards for fisheries and water quality. That's really the focus on the act, and ensuring reforestation and of course a healthy timber industry. So here are the two major themes or challenges that I think we're facing. As I alluded to, the domestic, local value added processing. That's how you create jobs here, as opposed to China. And we currently have one large sawmill in the area, Viking, on Prince of Wales, that are geared towards old growth timber. So we desperately need more investment in mills that are capable of processing young growth, capable of making specialty products like mass timber, biomass, other products. And one thing that investors look at when they look for areas to put a sawmill or some kind of wood processing infrastructure is long-term raw material supply. Nobody's going to invest $30 million in a sawmill if there's not a guarantee of 20 years of timber supply. So that's why the timber bridge that Tessa mentioned, where we step up and provide timber to the timber industry from other sources than the Tongass National Forest in order to get over this hopefully short-term period of uncertainty is so essential, that we keep that timber flowing and we demonstrate to investors that there is that secure, reliable, sustained supply of timber coming, and it will continue. That's one element of the equation. And the other is really providing incentives for domestic processors to compete with export prices. Right now, that's not always the case. And so in any business, people are going to sell to the highest bidder. If that is China, that's where the raw logs are going to go. If domestic manufacturers cannot compete with that, then you have a problem. So I'm certainly not a politician. I became a forester for a reason. And so it's way above my pay grade, but some kind of incentives to domestic processors is clearly going to be beneficial in keeping the logs in the Southeast and making them into 2x4s, plywood, veneer, mass timber, and shipping them to other parts of the nation or internationally. And Tessa pretty much covered this already. The recent decision by the Biden administration to stop harvesting old growth. That's a fact at this point, and we have joined efforts between state agencies to support the timber industry by stepping up and providing timber from the Haines State Forest and other areas. And the assumption is that in 5 years, we will get more meaningful amounts of young growth coming out from the Tongass National Forest. And I think in summary, just a quick word about recreation. This is actually from the Tanana Valley State Forest in Fairbanks, but our goal is to really be a multiple use forest. It's kind of a dated term, but it's very prescriptive. And we like to work with the mountain bikers and the skiers and everybody else to plan ahead and not just produce timber from the forest, but recreation opportunities. And so I think, as I mentioned, these trees and these forests and these ecosystems in Southeast Alaska, they will be here long after we are all gone. And one quote that I like, I think it was Aldo Leopold, was the land does not belong to us. We belong to the land. I thought that was very descriptive. And I think if we manage our forest resources and the land wisely, they can make an incredible difference and really be an integral part of a diverse Southeast Alaska economy. Thank you.
So one of the things about the Southeast Conference structure is we have our face-to-face meetings like we have here, and then we have our committee meetings where we do a deeper dive. And I'm looking forward to the next one that we set up, because I think that is some of the clearest thinking that I've ever heard spoken about timber management and the objectives of the multi-use forest. And I really appreciate your remarks today, and we'll look forward to zooming together to talk about, you know, how do we move forward? And I know the Forest Service has its struggles politically on a national level that sometimes makes it more complicated, but they too are willing to be as good partners as they can be on much of these same topics. So we'll have them with us as well in our next meeting on these topics as we move forward. One of the things we're going to do next is we're going to move into our membership meeting, which means everyone's invited. You know, it's not obligated, but we're going to move the tables around a little bit so the board members that are here are facing you, and the board members that are virtually can appear on the screen along with others. We're going to do that fairly quickly. There's going to be a bus here at 11:15 to take folks out to the ferry itself. Just so that you know those logistics, there are some snacks there. So would you please give a round of applause to our excellent panel this morning. Thank you, Deantha. Thank you, Tessa online. And thank you all, one and all. So thanks.